That's exactly what happened to a homeless girl named Clara one freezing night in London. She saved an old man's life, but she had no idea that old man was the father of England's most hated and cruelest duke, and when that duke found out what she'd done, her nightmare was just beginning. This is a story of secrets, power, and how one small act of mercy can change everything. You're going to hear about a girl who had nothing, an old man who had lost everything except his pride, and a son whose heart was made of stone. By the end, you'll ask yourself, can someone truly cruel ever be saved? Stick with me. Let's start at the worst moment of Clara's life. She was 19 years old. No family, no home, no money. She slept in doorways and under bridges, right in the heart of London. This wasn't the fancy London you see in movies. This was 19th century London, where the cold could kill you and the rich would cross the street just to avoid looking at you. Clara had been on her own for 3 years. Her parents died from a sickness that swept through their village. She came to the city hoping for work, but all she found was hunger and closed doors. Every day was the same. Wake up, frozen. Search for leftover bread. Try to stay invisible. But here's the thing about Clara. She never turned mean. Even when life kicked her down again and again, she still had this soft heart. She'd share her last piece of bread with a stray dog. She'd give her only blanket to a younger kid on the street. People called her foolish. She didn't care. One night, it was bitterly cold. The kind of cold that hurts your bones. Clara was curled up in an alley near the Thames River, trying to sleep when she heard a strange sound, a low groan, then a cough, then a thud. She got up and followed the sound. Behind some old crates, she found an old man lying on the ground. He was dressed in expensive clothes, a heavy wool coat, leather boots, a silver watch chain. But his face was pale, his lips were blue, and he wasn't moving much. Most people would have walked away. Rich old man in a poor alley. Not their problem. But Clara knelt down and put her hand on his forehead. He was burning up with fever. His breathing was shallow. She said, "Hey, old man, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open. He tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. "Help, please." Now, Clara had nothing. No money for a doctor. No warm room to take him to. But she did have 2 hands and a stubborn heart. She dragged him, literally dragged him, to a nearby stable that was empty for the night. She stole clean hay to make him a bed. She used her own scarf to wipe his face. She found a broken bucket, filled it with water from a public pump, and kept wet cloths on his head to bring down the fever. For 3 days and 3 nights, she barely slept. She fed him little bits of bread soaked in water. She held his hand when he shivered. She talked to him even when he was unconscious, telling him stories about her village just to keep him fighting. On the 4th morning, the old man opened his eyes. Really opened them. He looked at Clara and said, "You saved my life." She just smiled. "You're not dead yet. Don't thank me too soon." The old man laughed. It was a weak laugh, but it was real. He told her his name was Albert. He didn't say much more than that. But over the next few days, as he got stronger, Clara noticed things. His hands were soft, like he'd never done a day of hard labor. He had a ring with a crest on it, a lion and a crown. And when he spoke, even in weakness, he had this commanding voice, like he was used to being obeyed. But here's where the problem begins. One afternoon, a fancy black carriage pulled up near the stable. 2 men in fine suits got out. They saw Albert sitting up, leaning against a hay bale, and their faces went white. One of them ran over and said, "My lord, we've searched everywhere for you." Clara froze. "My lord," Albert sighed. He looked at Clara with sad eyes. "Child, I owe you the truth. My full name is Albert Ashworth. I am the Earl of Wessex, and my son is the Duke of Ashworth, the man they call England's cruelest duke." Clara's heart dropped. She'd heard the name. Everyone in London had heard of the Duke of Ashworth. He was a monster in a silk suit. He threw families out of their homes for being 1 day late on rent. He had men beaten for stealing a loaf of bread. He once burned down an entire row of cottages just because he didn't like the way they looked. From his carriage window, people whispered that his own servants were terrified of him, that he'd never smiled a day in his life. And Clara had just saved this monster's father. Albert saw the fear in her eyes. He grabbed her hand. "Don't be afraid. My son and we don't see eye to eye. I left because I couldn't stand his cruelty anymore. I walked out into the night and collapsed. If not for you, I would be dead. You are my angel." But Clara knew rich people don't stay grateful for long. And cruel sons, they don't like being in debt to a homeless girl. Albert was taken back to the Duke's estate. Before he left, he promised Clara he would return. He promised to reward her. She didn't believe him. She went back to her alley, back to her empty stomach, back to being invisible. A week passed, then two, no Albert, no carriage, no reward. Then one night, as Clara was sleeping, she was woken by the sound of boots. Heavy boots. Many of them. Torchlight filled the alley. A cold voice said, "That's her." The beggar girl. Before she could run, hands grabbed her. She was thrown into a carriage and taken to a massive stone mansion on the hill, the Duke's estate. She was dragged into a study. Behind a huge oak desk sat a man. He was young, maybe 30, with sharp cheekbones, black hair, and eyes like winter ice. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just stared at her like she was a bug on his floor. "You are the one who found my father," he said. It wasn't a question. Clara nodded, shaking. The Duke leaned forward. "My father speaks very highly of you. He says you saved his life with your own hands. He wants to give you £1,000. He wants to find you a home." Clara's heart leaped. £1,000. That was more money than she'd ever dreamed of. But then the Duke smiled, and that smile was worse than his frown. "Unfortunately," he said, "I cannot allow that." He stood up and walked around the desk. He circled her like a wolf. "My father is old and soft. He doesn't understand how the world works. If I reward every beggar who does a good deed, what message does that send? That kindness pays. That the poor can climb up by being nice." He laughed, a dry, ugly sound. "No, you will leave here with nothing. And if you ever try to contact my father again, I will have you arrested for theft. Do you understand?" Clara's throat closed up. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. But she'd learned long ago that tears meant nothing to cruel men. So she just nodded. The Duke snapped his fingers. A guard grabbed her arm. But just as they were about to throw her out, the door burst open. Albert stood there. His face was red with rage. He was leaning on a cane, still weak from his sickness, but his voice was strong. "You will not touch that girl." The Duke froze. "Father, you should be resting." "I should be ashamed," Albert shot back. "Ashamed that my own son would threaten the person who saved my life. You think I don't know what you do? You think I don't hear the stories? I left this house because I couldn't bear to look at you. But I came back because I hoped that you had a shred of decency left." The Duke's face turned to stone. "Decency is for fools. I am protecting our name." "Our name?" Albert laughed bitterly. "Our name is already mud because of you. But this girl, this homeless, penniless girl, she has more honor in her little finger than you have in your whole body." The Duke stepped closer to his father. For a moment, Clara thought he might hit him. But Albert didn't flinch. He said, "If you do not give her the £1,000, if you do not thank her on your knees for saving your own father's life, then I will disown you. I will go to the newspapers. I will tell them everything. How you treat the poor. How you treat me. And I will give every last penny of the family fortune to the orphanages of London." The room went silent. You could hear the fire crackling in the hearth. The Duke's eyes flickered. He wasn't scared of much, but he was scared of losing his money and his title. His father still had power. Old power, the kind that could ruin him. Slowly, the Duke turned to Clara. His jaw was tight. His hands were fists. He looked at her like she was poison. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a stack of notes, and threw them on the floor at her feet. "There," he hissed. "Take it, and get out of my sight." Clara didn't pick up the money right away. She looked at Albert. He nodded at her, tears in his eyes. She bent down, gathered the notes, and stood up. Then she did something the Duke never expected. She looked him straight in the eye and said, "You are the poorest rich man I have ever met." Then she walked out. Albert left the estate the next day. He set up a small home in the countryside and sent for Clara. She became his caretaker. His friend, the daughter he never had, the Duke never forgave either of them. But that didn't matter, because within a year, a scandal broke out. One of the Duke's business partners exposed his crimes. The Duke lost his title. He lost his lands. He ended his days alone, in a small rented room, remembered by no one with love. And Clara, she used that £1,000 to open a shelter for homeless children. It's still there today, on a quiet street in London. They call it Clara's home. So here's what this story really teaches us. Kindness doesn't always pay off right away. Sometimes it makes things worse before it makes them better. Sometimes the people you help won't thank you. Sometimes the powerful will try to crush you just for being good. But kindness has a way of coming back around. Clara didn't save Albert because she wanted money. She saved him because he was a human being who was dying. And that one choice, made in the cold and the dark, ended up changing everything. The cruel Duke thought he was untouchable. He thought money and fear would protect him. But in the end, his cruelty ate him alive. And the homeless girl, she built a legacy that outlasted his entire family name. If there's one thing to remember from this, it's this. Never be ashamed of having a soft heart in a hard world. That soft heart might just be the strongest thing about you. And hey, if you want to see another incredible story about someone who came from nothing and faced impossible odds, click the video popping up on your screen right now. Trust me, you won't believe this one either.